6 a.m., 2 patrol cars, my wife in handcuffs, Brenda on her porch, looking smugger than a cat with a canary. Then, Elena showed her badge, and everything flipped. Picture this. I'm standing in my Phoenix driveway in my pajamas, watching our HOA president orchestrate what she thinks is the arrest of the century. The morning desert air carries that sharp scent of creosote and impending justice, while the metallic click of handcuffs echoes off our perfectly manicured suburban street. Brenda had called 911, reporting federal impersonation and ongoing criminal activity. She'd even invited Channel 12 News because apparently public humiliation wasn't complete without cameras rolling. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for impersonating a federal officer," the cop announces. Exactly like Brenda had scripted it. Then my wife calmly says, "Officer, may I show you my Department of Justice credentials?" The badge comes out. Brenda's smug grin evaporates faster than water on summer asphalt, and suddenly, the woman who'd been screaming about law and order was about to learn what actual federal crimes look like. What would you do if your neighbor tried to get you arrested for literally doing your job? Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from, because this story gets so much better. Let me back up 18 months to when this nightmare started. My name's Marcus. I'm 45, Navy veteran turned telecommunications contractor who thought he'd found paradise in suburbia. Boy, was I wrong. My wife Elena, she's the kind of woman who makes criminals nervous just by existing. 15 years with the Department of Justice Financial Crimes Division. She's taken down money launderers, embezzlers, and white-collar scumbags who thought they were untouchable. But to our neighbors in Willowbrook Estates, she was just the unemployed woman who slept till noon. Willowbrook is one of those planned communities outside Phoenix where conformity isn't just encouraged, it's weaponized. Every lawn trimmed to exactly 2 in, every mailbox painted regulation beige, every American flag positioned at the precise angle specified in the CCNRs. The morning air always smells like fresh-cut Bermuda grass mixed with the faint desperation of people trying to maintain property values. Then there's Brenda Hutchinson, our HOA president and full-time professional busybody. Picture a woman who spent 30 years as a bank manager, got forced into early retirement, and decided to channel all that middle management energy into terrorizing a gated community. At 58, she'd found her calling, making other people's lives miserable with the power of bylaws and violation notices. Every morning at exactly 7 a.m., Brenda would emerge from her beige fortress in her pink tracksuit, clipboard clutched like a shield, prowling the streets for infractions. The crunch of gravel under her orthopedic shoes became our neighborhood's alarm clock and Elena's personal torture soundtrack. From day one, Brenda fixated on Elena with laser focus. See, when you work undercover financial crimes, your schedule doesn't exactly scream suburban soccer mom. Elena would leave at midnight for surveillance, sleep until noon, drive different government vehicles, and occasionally come home wearing gear that could stop a bullet. To Brenda's narrow worldview, this could only mean one thing. Elena was trouble. I'm just saying, Brenda would stage whisper to anyone with an earshot. Normal people have normal jobs. What kind of woman drives a different car every week and sleeps all day? Makes you wonder what she's really doing for money. The implication hung in the desert air like humidity, thick, uncomfortable, and impossible to ignore. The paranoia escalated when Elena started working a major case involving cryptocurrency fraud. More late nights, more gear, more mysterious phone calls in federal agent speak. To Elena, it was Tuesday. To Brenda, it was confirmation of every suburban stereotype she'd been nursing. The breaking point came on an October morning when Elena was conducting legitimate surveillance from our driveway. She's sitting in her unmarked sedan, wearing a tactical vest under her jacket, earpiece barely visible, doing actual federal agent work, professional, legal, important work. Brenda spotted her and apparently decided Elena was playing the world's most elaborate game of cops and robbers. 20 minutes later, she's pounding on my door like she's serving a warrant. "This ends today, Marcus." Brenda's face was flushed red against her pink tracksuit, making her look like an angry flamingo. "I don't know what kind of sick fantasy your wife is living out, but impersonating a police officer is a federal crime." She thrust a violation notice at me like she was serving divorce papers. 24 hours to make her stop this ridiculous charade, or I'm calling the real police. I tried diplomacy. Brenda, I think you might be misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, she snapped. I've documented everything. The costume, the fake radio, the suspicious cars. She's going to destroy our property values with this nonsense. The notice read, violation resident engaging in law enforcement impersonation, creating community safety concerns, and potential legal liability. $500 per day until compliance. That evening, Elena read the notice and started laughing. The kind of laugh that means someone's about to have a very bad time. 15 years taking down federal criminals, she said, and I get a violation notice for looking like myself. Neither of us realized that Brenda's obsession would soon expose crimes that made Elena's caseload look like parking tickets. Brenda didn't waste time turning her personal vendetta into a community crusade. Within 48 hours of issuing that first violation notice, she'd scheduled an emergency HOA board meeting and hired an attorney at $300 an hour, no less. The certified letter arrived Thursday morning, thick as a phone book and reeking of expensive legal stationery. My Navy training kicked in immediately. When someone starts throwing legal paperwork around, you better damn well know the rules of engagement. Notice of formal HOA hearing, it screamed in bold letters. Ongoing criminal impersonation violations. 3 pages of legal intimidation from some lawyer named Mitchell Hawthorne, essentially demanding Elena cease and desist all law enforcement cosplay activities or face a property lien. The audacity was breathtaking, even by HOA standards. But here's the thing about spending 8 years dealing with military regulations. You learn to read the fine print like your life depends on it. So, I poured myself a strong cup of coffee, cracked open our CCNRs, and started hunting for ammunition. Jackpot came on page 47. Section 4.3 clearly stated that HOA presidents cannot authorize legal expenses over $250 without a majority board vote. Brenda had just blown past that limit, like a teenager with their parents' credit card, and she'd done it solo. Even better, Section 7.1 made board members personally liable for unauthorized expenses. I remembered my old chief petty officer always saying, when someone doesn't know their own rules, those rules become your weapons. Smart man. I fired off a counter-complaint to the management company that same afternoon, citing both violations and demanding Brenda personally reimburse the community for her unauthorized legal adventure. Meanwhile, our neighborhood Facebook group had erupted into digital warfare. Brenda posted carefully cropped photos of Elena in tactical gear with captions, like community safety concerns and when does roleplay become dangerous. The comments section looked like a battlefield. Team Brenda shared horror stories about suspicious activities and declining property values. Team Elena pointed out that she minded her own business and kept the best lawn on the block. But Brenda's masterstroke was organizing a community safety discussion for Sunday evening. The flyers promised to address protecting our property values from disruptive elements, code words that made my skin crawl. Elena and I decided to attend, figuring we might as well watch this train wreck in person. The community center smelled like burnt coffee mixed with industrial carpet cleaner, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like angry hornets. About 30 residents showed up, the tension thick enough to choke on. Brenda had prepared an actual PowerPoint presentation, complete with slides titled Signs of Criminal Activity and Protecting Your Investment. She was deep into her performance, describing Elena's behavior patterns when Elena's phone rang, her federal supervisor calling about a case development. Yes, sir, Elena answered, stepping toward the hallway. Surveillance resumes at 06:00 tomorrow. Asset placement confirmed. Professional, concise, exactly how federal agents communicate. But Brenda heard every word and apparently decided Elena was escalating her fantasy to new heights. Did everyone hear that? Brenda announced, practically vibrating with vindicated smugness. Military time, surveillance talk. She's talking like she's in some kind of action movie. This is exactly the dangerous behavior I'm warning you about. A few residents nodded nervously. Others shifted uncomfortably in their folding chairs, but nobody seemed capable of grasping the obvious. Elena talks like a federal agent because she is one. Elena returned to find 30 pairs of eyes staring at her like she'd grown a second head. "Everything okay?" she asked, genuinely puzzled by the sudden Arctic freeze in room temperature. "Oh, everything's perfect," Brenda replied, her smile sharp enough to slice diamonds. "I was just explaining to our neighbors how seriously the FBI takes federal impersonation crimes." The threat hung in the recycled air like a toxic cloud. Elena looked at me with raised eyebrows, the universal expression for what fresh hell did I walk into. "You know what, Brenda?" Elena said calmly. "You should absolutely call the FBI. I think they'd be very interested in this situation." Brenda's smile widened. "Don't worry, honey. I plan to." As we walked home under the desert stars, Elena shook her head. 15 years investigating financial crimes, and this woman thinks I'm playing dress up. I squeezed her hand. She has no idea what's coming, and she really didn't, because while Brenda was busy preparing to report a federal agent to the FBI, she had no clue that her own financial house of cards was about to collapse in spectacular fashion. Monday morning arrived with the kind of desert heat that makes smart people stay indoors, but Brenda wasn't about to let a little thing like common sense stop her crusade. At exactly 8:47 a.m., because of course she'd logged the time, she marched into the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office like a woman on a mission from God. Her target, filing a formal police report against Elena for federal impersonation and ongoing criminal enterprise. I know the details because Officer Rodriguez called me that afternoon, and I could practically hear him trying not to laugh through the phone. "Marcus," I got to ask, "your wife isn't running some elaborate con game, is she? Because this lady just walked in here with enough documentation to prosecute a war crimes tribunal." Brenda had apparently spent the weekend crafting what she called her evidence portfolio, a 3-ring binder that would make FBI profilers weep with envy. Photos of Elena in tactical gear, time-stamped logs of her activities, pictures of different government vehicles, transcripts of overheard conversations, and printed articles about federal impersonation penalties. The woman had basically created a federal case against a federal agent. The irony was so thick you could spread it on toast. "She's demanding immediate arrest," Rodriguez continued. "Says your wife is running illegal security operations and poses a clear and present danger to community safety. I've seen some creative complaints, but this one's going in the Hall of Fame." Here's what Brenda didn't realize. When someone reports federal impersonation, the first thing any competent cop does is run the suspect's vehicle registration. Elena's unmarked sedan came back flagged as an active Department of Justice asset. Criminal Division. Rodriguez showed up at our door 2 hours later, looking like a man trying to solve a puzzle with half the pieces missing. The afternoon sun was beating down mercilessly, and the air smelled like hot concrete and the faint ozone scent of approaching monsoon season. Elena was in the backyard deadheading her roses, still wearing tactical pants from an early morning surveillance, because comfort beats suburban fashion standards every single day. "Ma'am, I need to follow up on some allegations," Rodriguez said, his professional demeanor barely concealing his amusement. "Can I see some identification?" Elena wiped her hands on her gardening gloves and produced her federal credentials, badge, Idaho card, the works. Rodriguez examined them like he was studying ancient artifacts, then called dispatch to verify the badge number. The radio crackled. "Badge 847-392 confirmed active DOJ Criminal Division agent Elena Vasquez, 15-year service record." Rodriguez's shoulders relaxed. "Sibley, ma'am, I apologize for the intrusion. I had to follow protocol." "No problem, officer." What exactly was I accused of? Federal impersonation, running illegal security services, and this is my favorite part, quote, "conducting suspicious surveillance activities that threaten community property values." Elena burst out laughing. "Surveillance activities that threaten property values. That's a new one." But Rodriguez wasn't laughing anymore. "Ma'am, you should know that filing false reports against federal agents falls under Title 18, Section 101. It's the same statute we use for lying to federal investigators. Carries up to 5 years. Carries up to 5 years. I watched Elena's expression shift from amusement to professional interest. She prosecuted enough cases to know that federal prosecutors don't mess around with false statements charges. I'm not looking to press charges, she said carefully. The woman seems genuinely confused. With respect, ma'am, this wasn't confusion. This was 3 days of deliberate investigation culminating in fabricated criminal allegations. That's different. While this conversation unfolded in our driveway, Brenda was glued to her kitchen window like a kid watching Saturday morning cartoons. She was probably expecting to see Elena dragged away in handcuffs. Instead, she watched Rodriguez shake Elena's hand, laugh at something she said, and drive away without arresting anyone. The cognitive dissonance must have been brutal. That evening, Brenda returned with reinforcements, Harold from down the street and Mrs. Patterson from the corner house, both looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. I saw the police were here, Brenda announced, practically vibrating with anticipation. When are they taking her in for processing? They're not, I replied, savoring the moment. Brenda's face went through more expressions than a mime having a stroke. What do you mean they're not? I filed official charges. I have documented evidence. Well, turns out Elena actually is a federal agent, I said. Crazy how reality works sometimes. The silence was so complete, I could hear Mrs. Patterson's hearing aid whistling. Harold took an actual step backward like federal agents might be contagious. That's impossible. Brenda sputtered. Real agents don't just they wouldn't. You're all lying. Elena appeared behind me, badge case in hand. DOJ Criminal Division badge 847392. Want to call and verify? Instead of backing down, Brenda's desperation kicked into overdrive. Then you fooled them too. Professional criminals can fake anything. I'm calling the FBI. They'll see through this charade. As her little delegation retreated, Elena shook her head. She's about to call the FBI on someone who works with the FBI. This is going to be epic, I said. And it absolutely was. Brenda didn't just call the FBI. She went full nuclear and filed a formal complaint through their online portal, complete with a 40-page dossier that would have impressed a KGB handler. The woman had screenshots, timelines, witness statements, and enough circumstantial evidence to prosecute a RICO case. Her complaint alleged that Elena was running an elaborate criminal enterprise involving federal impersonation, illegal surveillance, and potential terrorism preparation. She even included Google Maps, screenshots showing Elena's patrol routes, and traffic patterns that proved systematic neighborhood infiltration. The FBI's Phoenix field office received Brenda's magnum opus on a Thursday morning. By Thursday afternoon, Special Agent Thompson was calling Elena directly. Agent Vasquez, this is Special Agent Thompson, Phoenix field office. We received an interesting complaint about you today. Mind if I ask what you're working on that might have attracted civilian attention? Elena nearly choked on her coffee. Sir, I'm conducting financial surveillance on the Morrison crypto case. Standard white-collar stuff, nothing operational. Well, according to Mrs. Hutchinson, you're either running a sophisticated criminal operation or you're the most dedicated method actor in Arizona. She's provided enough documentation to make our fraud unit weep with joy. The conversation lasted 20 minutes. Thompson was professional, thorough, and increasingly amused as Elena explained the HOA situation. By the end, he was offering to call Brenda personally to explain federal law enforcement procedures. Actually, sir, let me handle this, Elena said. I think Mrs. Hutchinson is about to learn some hard lessons about false accusations. Meanwhile, I'd been busy with my own research project. Remember, I spent 8 years in the Navy dealing with bureaucratic nightmares, so I knew how to weaponize government paperwork. I filed a Freedom of Information Act request for Brenda's FBI complaint, curious to see exactly what she'd accused my wife of doing. The response arrived 2 weeks later, and it was a masterpiece of paranoid delusion. Brenda had constructed an entire conspiracy theory around Elena's work schedule, complete with theories about money laundering, drug trafficking, and potential foreign intelligence operations. But here's where it got legally interesting. Filing false reports to federal agencies isn't just a crime. It's a federal crime that carries real consequences. Back when I was stationed in Norfolk, our legal officer used to say, "Never lie to federal investigators because they have long memories and unlimited time to prove you wrong." Brenda was about to discover the wisdom of that advice. Elena's supervisor, Deputy Assistant Director Sarah Olivia, had been following the situation with growing concern. Olivia was a former federal prosecutor who'd spent 15 years putting white-collar criminals behind bars. Before moving into administration, she understood both the legal implications and the potential career damage that harassment campaigns could cause. Elena, this woman has now filed false reports with local police and the FBI, Olivia said during their weekly check-in. At what point does this become a pattern of harassment that affects your ability to do your job? She hasn't interfered with any actual operations, Elena replied. Just made my home life interesting. Interesting isn't the word I'd use. She's accused a federal agent of federal crimes based on fabricated evidence. That's not neighborhood drama. That's a potential felony. Chen was right, and Elena knew it, but she also knew that escalating to federal charges would turn a suburban dispute into a national news story, complete with questions about federal overreach and government intimidation. Let me try one more diplomatic approach, Elena said. If that doesn't work, we'll discuss other options. What Elena didn't mention was that her diplomatic approach involved revealing her federal credentials to the HOA board and explaining exactly what Brenda had been accusing her of doing. That opportunity came sooner than expected. Brenda, emboldened by her FBI complaint, called an emergency HOA meeting for the following Tuesday. The agenda item read, Calm Community Safety, Addressing Ongoing Criminal Activity and Federal Cover-Ups. She'd also invited Channel 12 News, claiming the story involved federal corruption and neighborhood intimidation. The reporter, probably expecting a slow news day story about HOA disputes, agreed to attend. Brenda had no idea she was about to become the star of her own public humiliation. The community center filled up fast. Word had spread through the neighborhood faster than gossip at a church. Social. Residents packed the folding chairs, many holding their phones ready to record whatever drama was about to unfold. Brenda stood at the front of the room, her presentation slides loaded and ready. She titled her PowerPoint Protecting Our Community When Federal Agencies Fail Us. Tonight, she announced to the crowd in the rolling news camera, I'm going to expose the truth about the criminal enterprise operating in our neighborhood and the federal cover-up that's protecting them. Elena and I sat in the back row watching this train wreck build momentum. She'd brought her federal credentials, but she was hoping she wouldn't need them. She was about to be very disappointed. While Brenda was busy building her federal conspiracy case, I was doing what any reasonable telecom contractor would do, following the money. See, my business involves financial software integration, which means I know how to read spreadsheets like scripture and spot irregularities that would make accountants nervous. The HOA's monthly financial reports had been nagging at me for weeks. Something felt off about the numbers, like trying to balance an equation where 2 plus 2 somehow equaled 5. So I did what Elena always taught me. When something doesn't add up, follow the money trail until it does. Our HOA collected roughly $180,000 annually in fees from 96 households. Standard expenses included landscaping, pool maintenance, insurance, and administrative costs. Simple math, predictable patterns, except Brenda's reports, showed expenditures that made Las Vegas spending look conservative. The red flag started with consulting fees. Over the past 18 months, the HOA had paid $23,000 to something called Desert Management Solutions for administrative consulting services. Problem was, I'd never seen any consultants, and nobody on the board seemed to know what services they'd provided. Then there was Pinnacle Landscaping Services, $31,000 for enhanced community beautification projects. Our landscaping looked exactly the same as when we moved in, minus the dead palm tree by the mailboxes that nobody had bothered to replace. But the real smoking gun was buried in the credit card statements. Brenda had been using the community credit card for purchases that ranged from suspicious to downright brazen. Grocery stores, department stores, gas stations, and what appeared to be vacation rentals in Sedona. I cross-referenced every vendor payment with actual services rendered. The pattern was textbook embezzlement. Create fake companies, submit false invoices, approve payments to herself, and cover the tracks with aggressive leadership tactics that discouraged questions. Elena found me at 2 a.m., hunched over my laptop, surrounded by printed bank statements and calculator tape. Honey, what are you doing? Your neighbor's been stealing from the community, I said, pointing at the spreadsheet that told the whole ugly story. $47,000 over 2 years, maybe more. Elena leaned over my shoulder, her financial crimes training automatically analyzing the evidence. Shell companies, false invoicing, credit card fraud. This is textbook white-collar theft. The irony was so perfect it hurt. Brenda had been accusing a federal financial crimes investigator of criminal activity while running her own embezzlement operation. It was like a burglar calling the police to report suspicious activity at the house he was robbing. "Can you do anything about it?" I asked. Officially, no. This would be a massive conflict of interest for me to investigate, but Marcus, Elena's voice had that tone she got when the pieces of a puzzle clicked into place. HOA embezzlement falls under state jurisdiction. Arizona revised statutes, Title 13 theft charges, become felonies when the amount exceeds $10,000. She was right, and we both knew it. Brenda had crossed the line from petty power tripping into serious criminal territory. Rye, the woman who'd been screaming about law and order, had been breaking the law herself for 2 years. "There's more," I said, pulling up another file. "She's been covering the missing money by deferring maintenance, cutting insurance coverage, and skipping required inspections. The community pool hasn't had proper chemical balancing in months, and she's been buying discount insurance that probably won't cover anything major." Elena sat down heavily. "So, while she's been harassing us about imaginary crimes, she's been committing real ones that could bankrupt every homeowner in Willowbrook." "Pretty much." "Well," Elena said with a smile that would have made Sharks nervous, "I think Mrs. Field. I think Mrs. Field. Hutchinson is about to discover what actual criminal investigation looks like. The hunter was about to become the hunted. And Brenda had no idea the trap was already closing. That weekend, I transformed our dining room into a war room that would have made Pentagon strategists proud. Coffee brewing at all hours, documents spread across every surface, and the kind of focused energy that happens when righteous anger meets meticulous planning. But I wasn't working alone. Elena might not be able to officially investigate, but she could damn well teach me how to build an airtight case that would make prosecutors weep with joy. "First rule of financial investigation," she said, handing me a fresh cup of coffee at 6 a.m. Saturday. "Document everything, assume nothing, and always follow the paper trail to its source." Our first recruit was Roberto Martinez, a retired CPA who lived 4 houses down. Roberto had spent 30 years auditing corporate books for the state of Arizona, and he had the kind of methodical patience that turns numbers into narratives. When I showed him Brenda's creative accounting, his eyes lit up like Christmas morning. "This is beautiful," he said, studying the spreadsheets with professional admiration. "She's got shell companies, inflated invoices, personal expenses disguised as community costs. It's like a textbook case study in small-scale embezzlement." Roberto agreed to conduct a formal forensic analysis, complete with charts, graphs, and documentation that would hold up in court. The man was retirement board and apparently considered financial fraud investigation an entertaining hobby. Next was Sarah Kellerman, a former paralegal who'd moved to Willowbrook after her husband's retirement. Sarah had spent 20 years working white-collar defense cases, which meant she knew exactly how prosecutors thought and what evidence they needed to make charges stick. "Arizona revised statutes are very clear about HOA embezzlement," she explained, pulling up the relevant laws on her laptop. "Any board member who misappropriates community funds commits theft in the first degree if the amount exceeds $10,000. Brenda's looking at a Class 3 felony which carries 2 to 8 years in prison. But Sarah's real value was her understanding of HOA law. She'd helped clients navigate the maze of regulations that govern community associations, and she knew exactly what procedures we needed to follow to remove a board member for cause. Our third ally was Tom Bradley, a Marine veteran who'd retired from 25 years of military police work. Tom brought operational expertise, how to gather evidence without contamination, how to document witness statements, and how to coordinate with law enforcement agencies. "The key is building multiple cases simultaneously," Tom explained during our Sunday planning session. "Civil case for recovery of funds, criminal case for prosecution, and HOA action for removal from the board. 3 different tracks all supporting each other. Jennifer Walsh, our social media coordinator, rounded out the team. She was a stay-at-home mom with a marketing background who understood how to document everything for maximum impact while staying within legal boundaries. "We need to control the narrative," Jennifer said, setting up a secure group chat for our team. "Brenda's been using social media to spread her conspiracy theories. We're going to use it to spread facts." Elena provided guidance that transformed our amateur investigation into something resembling professional law enforcement. She couldn't officially participate, but she could teach us proper evidence handling procedures, chain of custody requirements, and how to present findings to authorities. "Never assume malice when incompetence might explain the behavior," she warned us. "But when you find systematic patterns over extended periods, that's usually intentional criminal activity." Roberto's financial analysis revealed the full scope of Brenda's operation. She'd created 3 shell companies, all registered to post office boxes she controlled. Desert Management Solutions, Pinnacle Landscaping Services, and Willowbrook Security Consulting existed only on paper, but they'd collected over $47,000 in community funds. Sarah researched the legal requirements for emergency board meetings and member votes. Arizona law required a 2/3 majority to remove a board member for cause, but it also allowed for emergency action when criminal activity was suspected. Tom coordinated our evidence collection, creating detailed timelines that cross-referenced financial transactions with board meeting minutes. He also identified potential witnesses, residents who'd questioned Brenda's spending or noticed irregularities in community services. Jennifer documented everything digitally, creating backup copies stored in multiple locations. She also monitored Brenda's social media activity, which had become increasingly erratic as the woman prepared for her big revelation about Elena's criminal enterprise. By Sunday evening, we had enough evidence to support both criminal charges and civil recovery actions. More importantly, we had a plan that would expose Brenda's crimes at exactly the moment she tried to destroy Elena's reputation. Tuesday night, Elena said, reviewing our strategy, "One final time. She's planning to have me arrested on live television for federal impersonation. Instead, she's going to discover what happens when you commit actual crimes while falsely accusing federal agents." The irony was going to be absolutely delicious. Monday morning brought the kind of frantic energy that happens when desperation meets deadline pressure. Brenda had somehow gotten wind that residents were asking questions about HOA finances, and she went into full damage control mode faster than a politician caught in a scandal. The first sign of panic came at 6 a.m. when she called an emergency board meeting for that afternoon. The agenda was suspiciously vague: administrative restructuring and financial security protocols. But Roberto, who'd been quietly talking to other residents, heard through the neighborhood grapevine that Brenda was planning to reorganize the HOA's financial records. Translation: she was about to destroy evidence. By 10 a.m., Brenda was at the community center with a paper shredder that sounded like a wood chipper having a nervous breakdown. The mechanical whirring echoed across the parking lot, punctuated by the satisfying crunch of documents meeting their demise. Jennifer, bless her marketing background, happened to be walking her dog past the community center and decided to film the spectacle. 20 minutes of video showing our HOA president frantically shredding documents the day before her big presentation would make excellent evidence later. "She's destroying financial records," Jennifer texted our group chat. "Should I call the police?" "Not yet," Tom replied. "Let her dig deeper first." Meanwhile, Brenda was making phone calls that would have impressed a mafia boss for their combination of threats and desperation. Harold from down the street got a visit warning him about spreading false rumors that could result in legal action. Mrs. Patterson received a certified letter threatening defamation lawsuits if she continued participating in conspiracy activities. But Brenda's masterpiece was the voicemail she left for Elena's supervisor at the Department of Justice. Roberto's wife overheard it because Brenda was shouting into her phone while standing in her driveway. "This is Brenda Hutchinson, and I'm calling to report gross misconduct by one of your agents. Elena Vasquez is using federal resources to intimidate law-abiding citizens, and I have documentation proving she's running illegal operations from a residential area. If you don't take immediate action, I'm going to the media with evidence of federal corruption." Elena listened to the recording Jennifer had captured and just started laughing. "She's now accused me of using federal resources inappropriately while she's literally stealing community resources. The projection is incredible. That afternoon's emergency board meeting was a masterclass in authoritarian overreach. Brenda had stacked the room with her supporters and tried to ram through several motions designed to consolidate her power and cover her tracks. Motion 1. Immediate hiring of a financial security firm to protect community assets from external threats. The firm would charge $15,000 up front and report directly to the HOA president. Motion 2. New bylaws requiring unanimous board approval for any financial document requests by residents. Essentially, Brenda could veto any attempts to examine the books. Motion 3. Emergency assessment of $500 per household to address ongoing security concerns and legal expenses. Roberto attended the meeting and later described it as watching someone try to perform surgery with a chainsaw. She was so desperate she wasn't even trying to hide what she was doing. When Harold asked for details about the security firm, she literally said, "That's classified information for board members only." 2 residents walked out. 3 others started asking pointed questions about why emergency assessments were necessary when the community had supposedly healthy reserves. Brenda's answers got increasingly hostile and paranoid. "Some people in this community are working to undermine property values and create chaos," she announced. "I won't let outside agitators destroy what we've built here." But the real fireworks came when Elena's supervisor actually called her back. Deputy Assistant Director Olivia had done her homework and discovered that Brenda had been filing complaints with multiple federal agencies claiming Elena was everything from a terrorist to a foreign agent. Elena, this woman has now contacted the FBI, DEA, ATF, and Homeland Security, with variations of the same false allegations. She's also tried to reach the Attorney General's office and somehow got transferred to the Inspector General's hotline. Chen's voice had the tone of someone who'd moved past amusement into professional concern. This isn't neighborhood drama anymore. She's actively interfering with a federal employee's ability to perform her duties, and she's wasting significant government resources with frivolous complaints. "Ma'am, I think the situation is going to resolve itself tomorrow night," Elena said. "She's planning a public confrontation where she expects to have me arrested. Instead, she's going to discover what happens when the evidence goes the other way." "What evidence?" Elena explained about the embezzlement investigation our team had conducted. Olivia listened in then asked for copies of all documentation. "Elena, if this woman has been stealing community funds while filing false reports against federal agents, she's about to have a very bad week." The trap was set. All we had to do was let Brenda spring it on herself. Tuesday arrived with the kind of electric tension that makes desert storms, and Brenda was about to unleash the mother of all meteorological disasters. She'd spent the morning transforming the community center into her personal courtroom, complete with a projection screen, evidence tables, and enough dramatic lighting to make law and order jealous. The smell of burnt coffee and nervous energy filled the air as residents filed in, most clutching their phones like digital weapons. Word had spread through Willowbrook faster than wildfire. Tonight's meeting was either going to be the greatest vindication in HOA history or the most spectacular public meltdown ever recorded. Brenda had invited everyone: Channel 12 News, the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, representatives from 3 different federal agencies, and what appeared to be half the neighborhood. She'd even hired a court reporter because apparently she wanted an official transcript of Elena's arrest. Tonight, she announced to the packed room and rolling cameras, "Justice will finally be served. For too long, this community has been terrorized by criminal elements masquerading as law enforcement. But thanks to my investigation, the truth will finally come to light." Her PowerPoint presentation was titled Operation Neighborhood Watch, exposing federal corruption and criminal conspiracy. The woman had apparently been watching too many spy movies during her evidence-shading marathon. Elena and I sat in the back row with our team, watching Brenda orchestrate her own destruction with the kind of morbid fascination usually reserved for natural disasters. Elena had her federal credentials ready, but she was hoping the evening would end with criminal charges, not badge revelations. Brenda's presentation started with surveillance photos she'd taken of Elena over the past 6 months. "Subject exhibits classic patterns of criminal surveillance behavior," she announced, pointing at pictures of Elena watering her garden while wearing tactical pants. The room was dead, silent, except for the hum of the news camera and the occasional cough from someone trying not to laugh. "Mrs. Patterson," bless her heart, actually raised her hand and asked, "Brenda, isn't that just Elena doing yard work?" "Exactly what they want you to think," Brenda snapped back. "Professional criminals are experts at maintaining cover stories." But the real showstopper came when Brenda unveiled her evidence of federal conspiracy. She'd somehow obtained copies of Elena's work, emails through what appeared to be illegal surveillance, and she was projecting them on the screen for everyone to see. "Look at this coded language," she said, highlighting an email about asset placement and target acquisition. "This is clearly criminal communication, disguised as official business." Officer Rodriguez, who'd been watching this train wreck with growing concern, finally stood up. "Ma'am, those look like legitimate federal law enforcement communications. Where exactly did you obtain federal emails?" Brenda's face flushed red. "A concerned citizen provided them through proper channels. Ma'am, intercepting federal communications without authorization is a federal crime. I need to know your source." The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Even Brenda's supporters started shifting uncomfortably in their folding chairs. But instead of backing down, Brenda doubled down with the desperation of someone whose entire world view was collapsing. "I demand immediate arrest of the subject for federal impersonation," she shouted, pointing dramatically at Elena. "I have documented evidence of ongoing criminal enterprise." That's when Elena stood up, badge case in hand. "Ma'am," she said calmly, "I'm Special Agent Elena Vasquez, Department of Justice, Criminal Investigations Division, badge number 847392. Would you like to call DOJ headquarters to verify?" The silence was so complete you could hear the desert wind rattling the windows. Brenda's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. The news cameras zoomed in on her face, capturing the exact moment reality crashed into delusion. But Brenda, God bless her commitment to catastrophe, wasn't finished yet. "That's fake," she screamed. "Professional criminals can forge anything. I demand federal verification." Agent Thompson from the FBI field office, who'd been watching this circus with professional interest, stepped forward. "Ma'am, I can confirm Agent Vasquez's credentials. I spoke with her supervisor this afternoon." "Then you're all part of the conspiracy," Brenda shouted, now fully committed to her own destruction. "How deep does this corruption go?" That's when Roberto stood up with his forensic accounting report. "While we're talking about criminal activity," he announced, "perhaps we should discuss the $47,000 Mrs. Hutchinson has embezzled from community funds over the past 2 years. The room exploded. Residents started shouting questions. The news reporter practically tackled Roberto for an interview, and Brenda's face went whiter than desert sand. "That's impossible," she whispered, but her voice carried in the sudden silence. "Actually," Roberto continued, "it's all documented. Shell companies' false invoices, personal credit card charges, everything." Elena looked at me and smiled. "And that," she said quietly, "is how you catch a real criminal." The hunter had just become the hunted, and the whole thing was, as on live television. The community center erupted like a shaken soda bottle. Residents who'd been quietly sitting through Brenda's conspiracy presentation suddenly came alive, shouting questions about missing money and demanding answers that Brenda clearly didn't have. $47,000. Harold's voice cut through the chaos. "That's why our pool maintenance has been garbage for 2 years, and why the landscaping looks like a desert wasteland," added Mrs. Patterson, her hearing aid whistling with feedback as voices rose around her. But Brenda wasn't going down without a fight. She grabbed the microphone like a life preserver, her voice cracking with desperation. "This is exactly what I warned you about. They're using sophisticated disinformation tactics to discredit my investigation." The Channel 12 reporter, sensing the story had just upgraded from neighborhood drama to actual news, pushed closer with her cameraman. "Mrs. Hutchinson, are you denying the embezzlement allegations?" "I'm saying this is all part of the conspiracy," Brenda shrieked, pointing wildly at Elena. "She's a criminal who's infiltrated our community and turned you against me." That's when Officer Rodriguez had apparently heard enough. He stepped forward, his hand resting casually on his radio. "Ma'am, I need you to calm down and answer some questions about these financial allegations." Sarah stood up next, her paralegal training kicking in as she addressed the room with courtroom precision. "According to Arizona revised statutes, Title 13, theft of community funds exceeding $10,000 constitutes a Class 3 felony. The documented evidence shows systematic embezzlement over a 2-year period. The legal terminology hit the room like a cold slap. Residents who'd been shouting suddenly went quiet, realizing they weren't just watching neighborhood drama. They were witnessing the exposure of serious crimes. Brenda's supporters began backing away from her like she'd developed a contagious disease. The 3 board members who'd been enabling her reign of terror suddenly found the floor tiles fascinating, desperately trying to distance themselves from the radioactive fallout. "I demand to see this so-called evidence," Brenda announced. But her voice had lost its commanding authority and now sounded more like a desperate plea. Roberto opened his laptop and connected it to the projection system. Within seconds, the screen filled with spreadsheets, bank statements, and transaction records that painted a picture so clear even Brenda's most loyal supporters couldn't deny it. "Desert Management Solutions," Roberto announced, highlighting the fake company. "Registered to a P.O. box that Mrs. Hutchinson controls. $31,000 in payments for services never rendered." The room gasped. Someone in the back row started recording with their phone. "Pinnacle Landscaping Services," Roberto continued. $16,000 for community beautification that never happened. More gasps, more phones came out, and my personal favorite, Roberto said with the satisfaction of a man who'd found the smoking gun, "community credit card purchases at Target, Walmart, and what appears to be a weekend resort in Sedona." That's when the dam burst completely. Residents started shouting about every maintenance issue, every delayed repair, every corner that had been cut over the past 2 years. The sound was like an angry beehive that had been kicked by a particularly stupid bear. Elena chose that moment to deliver the coup de grace. She stood up, her federal credentials clearly visible, and addressed the room with the kind of calm authority that comes from 15 years of taking down actual criminals. "Ma'am," she said, looking directly at Brenda, "you've spent 6 months filing false reports against a federal agent while committing the exact type of financial crimes I investigate for a living." The irony would be hilarious if it wasn't so pathetic. The mic drop silence was broken only by the clicking of cameras and the soft whirring of the news camera, capturing every second of Brenda's public destruction. Brenda's face cycled through about 12 different emotions before settling on desperate rage. "You can't prove any of this. These documents are forged. This is all part of the conspiracy." But Officer Rodriguez was already reading from his notepad. "Mrs. Hutchinson, based on the evidence presented tonight, I'm placing you under arrest for theft in the first degree, a Class 3 felony under Arizona law." The handcuffs clicked with the same metallic sound that had started this whole saga 6 months ago. Except this time, they were going on the right person. As Rodriguez led Brenda toward the door, she turned back to the room one final time. "This isn't over. When the truth comes out, you'll all see who the real criminals are." Elena called out sweetly, "Ma'am, the truth did come out. It just wasn't the truth you were expecting." The room erupted in applause. The news camera captured it all, and somewhere in the crowd, someone started chanting, "Justice, justice," until the whole room joined in. It was the most satisfying ending to the worst neighborhood dispute in Willowbrook history. The aftermath of Brenda's arrest unfolded like the most satisfying revenge movie ever filmed. Except this time, the popcorn was free, and the justice was real. Within 48 hours, Channel 12's footage had gone viral. And by weekend, we were fielding calls from CNN, Fox News, and every morning show in America, wanting to cover the HOA Karen who tried to arrest a real federal agent. The smell of sweet vindication mixed with desert blooms as spring arrived in Willowbrook, bringing new life to a community that had nearly been destroyed by one woman's corruption and paranoia. Brenda's legal troubles multiplied like Arizona tumbleweeds in a windstorm. Maricopa County filed theft charges for embezzlement. The FBI opened investigations into false reports against federal agents. The IRS discovered her consulting companies had never filed tax returns. Even the Postal Service got involved because she'd used mail fraud to set up those fake business addresses. She pleaded guilty to everything, rather than face federal prosecution, agreeing to pay full restitution, plus penalties totaling $78,000. The community recovered every stolen penny through her forced asset liquidation, including the sale of her precious beige fortress to cover damages. But here's where this story gets beautiful. Instead of just refilling HOA coffers, our new democratically elected board created the Willowbrook Community Scholarship Fund. Every year we award three $5,000 scholarships to local kids whose families demonstrate financial need, turning Brenda's theft into opportunities for deserving students. The sound of children playing in our restored community areas, funded by recovered embezzlement money, became the soundtrack of actual justice. Roberto manages the scholarship fund with transparent accounting that makes corruption impossible. Elena serves as advisory board chair because having a federal financial crimes investigator review your books tends to keep everyone remarkably honest. Sarah handles legal compliance. Tom coordinates security protocols, and Jennifer manages communications that actually bring the community together. Our transformation became a model for HOA reform across the Southwest. We've hosted delegations from communities in Texas, Nevada, and California, all seeking to implement our Willowbrook Transparency Protocol, a system of financial oversight that prevents future Brendas from destroying communities. Elena's federal credentials became neighborhood treasure rather than neighborhood terror. Local crime dropped to essentially zero once word spread that we had a real federal agent in residence. Kids started calling her Agent Elena, and she became our unofficial security consultant, teaching neighbors how to spot actual criminal activity versus imaginary conspiracies. My telecommunications business exploded after our story went viral. Turns out being known as the guy who helped expose HOA corruption made me incredibly popular with communities dealing with similar problems. I now provide financial transparency consulting across 3 states, teaching boards how to implement oversight systems that make embezzlement oversight. The practical takeaway: always demand quarterly financial audits with independent oversight. It's the single most effective way to prevent HOA corruption. Elena speaks at federal training seminars about employee harassment and has become the Justice Department's go-to expert on HOA-related crimes. She jokes that she finally made financial investigations sexy by turning it into neighborhood justice porn. But the real victory is our annual Accountability Day celebration held every October on the anniversary of Brenda's arrest. What started as a block party has become a regional festival celebrating community governance reform, complete with food trucks, live music, and workshops on civic engagement. The Desert Conservation Project we funded with recovered money transformed our common areas into a showcase of native plants that attract hummingbirds whose wings whisper promises of renewal every morning. Property values increased 30%, not because of oppressive conformity, but because people want to live in communities known for integrity and actual justice. Last month's follow-up news story featured Elena giving advice that's become our community motto: document everything, follow the money, and never underestimate the power of neighbors working together for what's right. As I write this, our investigation team is consulting with communities across America dealing with corrupt officials. Roberto's retirement has become busier than his working years, and he couldn't be happier. Here's my challenge for you. What's your worst HOA horror story? Drop it in the comments below. I guarantee some of you have nightmare tales that make Brenda look like an amateur. And smash that subscribe button for HOA Stories if you love watching corrupt power trippers get exactly the justice they deserve. We've got a whole library of satisfaction coming your way, because apparently America has no shortage of HOA villains who desperately need some accountability from all of us here at HOA Stories. Thanks so much for watching today's HOA Karen Meltdown. If you enjoyed seeing neighbors stand their ground and karma catch up, smash that like button, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe so you won't miss the next HOA drama we bring you.